Okay. We do. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask everyone to stand. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Next is public comments, and I know I have several here. I have three. Do we have any more? Any others? Okay. So let's see. Let me make sure I read this correctly. We'll now open the meeting to public comments, including comments on any agenda items. On the screen, you will see three ways for public comments to provide input to the CAC. That's us. All comments received will be shared with the committee members and made part of the public record. So first, I'll ask John Sidor.
Hi.
Okay.
How you doing?
Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you. My name is John Sider. I'm a resident of the Sanctuary Cove community that's in Palmetto. I'm here on behalf of the 255 residences of that community to talk a little bit about the Bradenton Palmetto Connector Alternative Corridor, the process leading up to the down selection of 3 alternatives versus the 10, and specifically how it gets our neighborhood right on 16th Avenue on the river. So I'll be brief. I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'll just do that. All recent points other than rob on tangents. I'm here to request the MPO to be an advocate in terminating phase 2 and PD&E study of the Bradenton Palmetto Connector Alternative Corridor. We believe that the process of down selecting the bridge options used inaccurate, outdated, and inadequate data with minimal public awareness and input specifically to our neighborhood. The project phase 1 planning used an outdated decision matrix with inaccurate or missing details for things like the home count impact, historical structures, recreational land, as well as a software model to the 2040 traffic predictions that we request be looked at a little harder for its accuracy. This is a really key point to us based on FDOT methodology memo dated August 7th, 2024. FDOT provided inadequate notice and awareness of option being modified to the residents of our community, Sanctuary Cove, the people that live on Canal Road, Bradenton's 9th Street, the people of the leadership team at the Manatee School of Performing Arts, and pretty much all businesses located on Canal from 301 all the way up to 41. Key point for us, the FDOT project team did not know that the 255 residences of Sanctuary Cove existed, and that an additional 300 units are in the works of ongoing construction in the community right along 16th Avenue and the river. Until one of our residents reached out to the folks at Bartow. We invited them to come visit with us. We had a great meeting with the project team to learn more about each other. The down selection from the 10 to 3 options had already been completed by the time of that meeting in October. It was already completed by the time of the town hall at the Manatee Fairgrounds a couple of weeks later in November. I'll kind of wrap up here just saying that we believe that the data used for the phase 1 planning, again, was outdated. We ask that the team take a look back at the process for how we're trying to go forward. We're not trying to just push out our option 2. We think the bigger picture, there's a lot more alternatives out there than the original 10 or the down selected the 3. Don't let the project momentum get in the way of critical thinking of a path forward. Please look back and start over. There's more options than the original 10. And I thank you for your time and respect the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Are there any of the 7 options that weren't considered that you guys are more in favor of?
Anyone that doesn't go by there.
Yeah, I mean, when we sat with the project team from FDOT, we had a big storyboard out with all 10 options. And the one that jumped up to us, and not being slighted about our option D, it was D, the Gillette Road option.
Yeah, we're not familiar with the details.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it's a state road. It's a straight shot from 275. We put some on-ramps out there. It literally looks like a bypass that parallels 275 or 75. It takes the traffic out of Palmetto itself between 41 and Tamiami. I mean, it just looks clear cut to me. There's longer mileage to be built. We did some calculations with the FDOT folks on the cost of the bridge from our riverside to the Bridington side versus the other bridge at D and the other mileage of roads to be redone. So, I mean, not trying to push it one way or another, but
Do you know if that reduction from 10 to 3, that cost was a factor or a major factor in that?
you kind of hit us on a sore spot there. The cost wasn't really part of the formulation. There's a decision matrix that was in one of the latest packages that was presented at the town hall at the fairgrounds. There's the 10 options. There's about 10 characteristics. Some of that could have been low-income housing. It could have been historical, architectural, or agricultural type properties, traffic estimated flows, which we're questioning how those were calculated. If that decision matrix was truly what was, a simple way to look at, all right, it's obvious that these 6 or 7 should go. There's inaccurate information in there to have made that decision. I think that's our main point, that we should look back to the whole planning side of things. And there's so many other good projects you're all managing. They're all going to have an impact on this particular project. We don't understand how we keep pushing the train forward when a lot of good things, we're already seeing changes from 75, the on-ramp at 301 and 75, taking flow off of 301. It's having a big impact right now in 3 weeks already. We feel it, we see it, we're right there. So, and also just one last one and I'll beg out. From what we can tell, this is a lot of software, computer modeling type of things, whatever the tools are that you all have as traffic engineers. The real hard traffic studies of getting interns out on corners and, really looking at who's driving the neighborhood and where they're going and trying to figure that out versus a lot of assumptions, because I know how that works. I'm an engineer by schooling and aerospace is an industry. You can make things look any way you want, right? So that's where I'm pleading that you kind of take a look back to the planning side before you keep pressing forward, spending taxpayer dollars that are funded for phase 2 and take a pause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. And as we said, that'll be in the record, so it'll be taken up at some point. So,
Thank you.
next we have Danny Williams.
That's me.
Okay.
My name is Danny Williams. I'm with the Sarasota Mobility Alliance. I'm here because we have an item about Vision Zero and deaths and serious injuries on our roadways. I appreciate the work that the MPO and Nina does putting this together. I know it's a big undertaking. And I realize we have to work within the system that we have, and the system says, since the state says we're 0, we have to be 0. I want to repeat that. We don't seem to be working our way towards 0 very quickly or very well. I'm frustrated that we move so slowly in moving the numerator of that killed and serious injuries per vehicle miles traveled. Those are people, those are our family members, those are our neighbors, those are our county residents that are killed and injured. And I'm also frustrated that we never really bring it up much. Vehicle miles traveled may be not the best way to look at this, even though I know that's the standard way this is done. Consider deaths and injuries per capita, how many people live in the county and how many of them got killed. That's more what is important to me on the ground and my family and my neighbors and other residents of the county. The fact that I have to drive further to get from my Lakewood Ranch house to Whole Foods, which jacks up the vehicle miles traveled versus walking around the corner to get my groceries, should not affect how we represent our safety. And I think we're underrepresenting that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Ann?
Actually, more of a rebuttal, really. You're absolutely right. I'll be the first to tell you, I work just roughly outside of Tampa, honestly. And the amount of just aggressive driving that I experience on a near daily basis, just between 75 and my place on Marcus and Wallow, it's pretty insane. So I definitely agree with you on that, and I'm glad that you definitely brought that to the forefront, because I'm not even gonna pretend, you're literally playing with your life when you're on that road, on these roads. You're literally playing with your life. You're just throwing the dice, taking a chance to see if you're gonna get home in one piece. So, you know, definitely you're really preaching to the choir on this one, so.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Lance Thomas.
That's me. So my name is Lance Thomas. I'm a citizen of the city of Sarasota, also with the Sarasota Mobility Alliance. And one of my goals for this year is to become more educated about Vision Zero, that process, how other cities are doing it across the country and how we're implementing it, just to see how we're doing. And so I had comment about the agenda item today with our setting our safety targets, which there are 5 specific metrics that we have to report. I think the state has to report something, then NPOs have 180 days to follow the numbers. The state has said that, hey, we're gonna have 0 fatalities, 0 fatal injuries, there's a rate. And that is a great long-term goal. But in reality, it's hey, for this 5-year window, this is what we think this is our goal here. And what's frustrating is if you do a Google search for safety targets MPO, you'll get all the different MPOs for Atlanta, Des Moines, Lincoln. I pasted like 5 of them into a Word document. I was kind of building up information. But no one else sets the 0 target. Everyone else is looking at, hey, here's where our stats are. Here's where the trend is going down, and we expect that to continue, or it ticked up, but that was an anomaly because of COVID or something. It should trend down. And then it's either the state provides a statewide goal, and then the NPOs will say, okay, here's the pie, here's Sarasota Manatee's cut of that pie. If the state is 3,000, we're 25% or whatever we're going to be. And so that's a realistic goal that you can target. I don't think that setting a 0 target just means we're not really taking it seriously, in my opinion. It's a great long-term goal. I believe the MPO used to have, I think in the $20-45 long range plan. Hey, let's get to 0 deaths by 2045. We can do that by reducing by 4 fatalities a year. And that seems to be a good intermediate step-by-step goal. And then somewhere along the way, we adopted this destination 0, where we scratched those realistic targets and we went to 0. And we're never going to hit our targets if it's an unrealistic number. So that was a comment I had for today.
Any comments? I would offer one comment that I know I've been on this board a couple of years, and it seems like every year that idea, your frame of reference is a serious topic, and we discussed it in depthly, and we did come back to 0 this last year. I know that. So, but I think this board, this committee understands what you're saying. We understand that. I don't know if it's a philosophy or whatever you want to call it, but we do understand. I think we do understand where you're coming from, and see that the idea of 0 is kind of hard to grasp, but we have talked about it a lot, and we will continue to discuss it. I'm sure it comes up today.
What's frustrating is the MPO used to have real numbers, and then it got just wiped out.
I'll intervene in that one. So the MPO still tracks all of that, correct? Right. So we don't just go and say it's 0. We're not going to give you the data. I mean, we actually know, we track exactly progress or not progress against that target 0. So regionally, we're growing. I think the number is about 6% has been our VMT growth over the last 5 years. So actually, if we wanted to set a realistic target with VMT, as Danny mentioned, we'd actually have to set an increasing rate of number of tests, right? If we're actually following VMT, because we're growing at such a rate that we could do that. Problem is, data consistency is probably not exactly where we want it to be. You've also got putting a number on a page is saying that's a realistic number that we're okay with killing this year. So if we make it 125 next year, the reduction act was 5% a year every 5 years to get down to potentially 0 by 2045 was our original thought and process. That was an arbitrary number as well. That was if we reduce it by 5 every 5 years, we can hit this one day, right? So setting that number and then going to the board and coming back and saying, okay, I mean, we said 120 this year was the goal, it was 125. What did we do to get there? Typically in most places in the state of Florida, it's not an anomaly, it's actually just going up. So a lot of that has to do with setting policy and setting direction when it comes to zero, not just saying, this is a specific number on a page that we want to get to one day. So it's less to do with the actual number and more of the sentiment behind getting to zero, rather than saying, okay, next year, hopefully it's 122 instead of 125. It's kind of just, it's a number that we probably.
It seems like a puppet show to me.
And maybe for some, maybe the state has a different position on it, maybe for them it is just putting, zero on a page and ignoring it, to your point. That's not what we're trying.
Nowhere else, most outside of Florida, this isn't how it works, sure.
And, I think there's a reason behind Florida's been consistent from 2017, mandated by federal law, that they were maintaining zero the whole time. We did set from 2017 to 22, we did set individualized targets for those states. And every year the numbers went up. So is it realistic to expect that we're going to reduce that by just doing our standard modus operandi of how we go about addressing safety education, enforcement, engineering? Is there a way that we go about doing that? We are, and there's action plans that are involved in doing that. We have a set number of things that we're working on across the board in all those facets to bring those numbers down. Zero is an aspirational goal by many standards. No one is expecting to go out there and have it be zero tomorrow. It probably will never be zero ever, because there is always some inherent risk built into a system. But the reality is that's why we set it at zero, is that we can take that arbitrary number, I think, that sits out there. And a lot of these are projections, right? Most of these numbers are, we get to the end of the year, we finally have a number. Oh, this year we seriously injured hundreds and we killed 100 and on average about 120 people on average. It's probably not going to go down anytime soon, given our growth and the number of new visitors and residents in our region. That's something that we have to deal with and figure out how to address better.
My concern towards that thought is that people in wheelchairs and walkers on 14th Street or 41, whatever you want to call it, the sidewalks are not appropriate. There's giant light poles in the middle of the sidewalks. No way a wheelchair could go around that, or a person in a walker. Or 57, I think, in 14th, where there's Starbucks. There's not even a sidewalk. There's a dirt trail that leads to the bus stop. And I've seen people that have to cut through that very busy parking lot in a wheelchair to get to the parking or the bus stop. So, and I've seen people in wheelchairs and walkers walking on 14th Street because there's no other safe place to walk. So if you want to talk about that, check out 14th Street.
Okay, Kurt, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to comment. I was going to raise this actually under the agenda, but so I'm glad you brought this up, because I remember Bob last year raised this very question as well. And if zero is just an aspirational number, then resolution strikes me as somewhat meaningless. And or that the fatalities year to year, is that just an arbitrary number? Is there any way through all your measurements?
Setting a reduction on it would be on average, if you go to any NPO really around the country, the reduction strategy is that they set it in a strategy that they think may be potentially attainable, right? So is it 5% a year? Is it a percentage? Is it a number? So in a naturalized, urban area, you say, on average, we've got 125 fatalities. Everyone has to set a metric of reasonable reduction. Most areas, in urban areas, numbers aren't going down, right? In most urbanized areas, numbers are going up. So the thought is, okay, how do you go about, we set a hard number of this many per year or percentage per year to get to this zero number at 2045. That was historically how it's been done. And the state of Florida took a separate approach in that they've been at zero since 2017, since the very beginning of this, before they even had really collected data on it. We took the separate approaches. We collected data, we went through the process, and then we arrived at zero because we understood that the number that ended up at the end of the year, right, of 120 and change, going up by maybe 1 or 2 a year. I think we'll see that on the board today. Serious injuries are in fact going down and have been on average. The number of bike ped activities and crashes and deaths that are related to those have gone up. So we're understanding the trends of why these things are happening and even where. The high injury network, it's a number of 20 segments that the vast majority of our serious deaths, serious injuries and deaths occur on those corridors. So we're understanding where and why they're happening for some cases, but how we go about picking those numbers and reducing them, everyone has to make some assumptions in doing that, and that's the same across the board in any NPO.
Well, you're giving us some metrics, but which are kind of make some judgments. I mean, you're spending a lot of time and a hell of a lot of money against trying to make the streets safer in different ways.
Yeah, and the CAC can certainly make a recommendation that they want to set specific targets. Of course, the NPO board sets the policy and the decision on that. The CAC can certainly make a recommendation that you want to return to setting a target. No one's saying that that's not possible. But the board has to make the final decision on, do we want to go back to the time where we're setting, an annualized target of of reduction, or do we want to maintain a similar course and path as NPOs in the state and the state themselves? So that's a judgment call by the CAC.
So should we carry this discussion when we get to that?
Yeah.
I think that's, we have a forum, and we're gonna have to make some decisions at that time. So if that's okay with everyone, we will move to the next agenda item, knowing that we're coming back to this as an action item. Okay. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now, we're on to action items. Action item number 5A, Transportation Improvement Program TIP amendments. Pam, you're up again.
Yeah, we had 5 of them to take to the board. And of the 5, 4 of them had to do with our transit system. They had applied for the grants for 5310. And so the monies were awarded, but they were not things that were already in the TIP, so they have to be added too. So we have a 5310 capital for Meals on Wheels in Sarasota, Bradenton, UEZA. We have the 5310 operating assistance for the Manatee County Area Transit. We had the Sarasota County Operating Service Development Grant for the 77 expansion for Sarasota for the Breeze. We had a 5310 capital grant for Sarasota County so that they could get more buses or use whatever they needed to on the 5310 grant. And then the other one was for 15th Street, 87th Street. There was a new phase that was added into it for a safety project for a strategic intermodal system for this project on 15th Street or State Route 70 from 15th to 87th Street.
The east or west?
I can check for you if you need to.
Just curious.
I don't have it right at the moment. Doesn't State Route 70 run?
It runs down 53rd all the way to 75th and jogs over to Cortez. So it's probably east, but It used to turn at 15th Street and go north all the way to 64.
I do not know when they're doing on that one.
Any other questions? These are in the packet too, by the way. You can get it. It was emailed out. Any questions of Pam? Any other questions? So we need to, this is an action item, so we'll need a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Here's a hot ticket. Next item is 5B. And safety target settings.
I'll answer.
Nina, you want to start?
I'll do it.
Here we go.
So yes, as mentioned, this is an annual mandate set forth by federal highway for every MPO in the country and every state to adopt safety and performance targets. These are due to FDOT by February 27th, and we'll be taking these proposed targets to the board on the January 27th meeting. MPOs and the state adopt targets based on 5 performance measures, which are dictated by the federal government. That is the number of fatalities, fatality rate, number of serious injuries rate, and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. These are all based on 5-year rolling averages. So this year, we are proposing at this point to continue targets of 0 for each of the 5 performance measures, and that's consistent with 2023 to 2024, for which the MPO elected to set specific targets based on available data at the time. The federal government does allow you the opportunity to do either or. So just taking a quick look at the data. So for clarity, I'll talk about 2020 to 2024 as a 5-year period. So looking at daily vehicle miles traveled, we've seen just over 6% increase from 2020 to 2024. Those 2024 numbers are estimates. And in the total annual crashes, this is fatal and serious injury, as well as possible injuries or no injuries, have increased by about 5%. So looking at that same.
Back to the last slide. So that's a 5-year running average. So we can divide 21,895 by 5 to get the annual average for that annual period.
Sure, and we can
Okay.
provide that data as
All right, okay.
as well.
What was the increase in population during that period of time?
I don't know off the top of my head. The board did request population-specific data last year that we did report. And we found a very similar trend to what we're seeing here with the increase in population next to the crashes as well. But we can certainly provide that data as well. So looking at those 5-year rolling averages, for fatalities and fatality rate, we're seeing about a 6% and 5% increase from 2020 to 2024. Again, the 2024 averages are estimates at this point. The 2024 crash data is not yet complete. There's a 30-day period between when a crash happens and when the report is submitted, so that number may very well increase. This is the data that we had available at the time that we pulled it. And also the 2024 VMT data is not yet released by FDOT, so we did a projection based on the last 7 years. So, and this increase in fatalities and fatality rates is very consistent with what's happening in the state of Florida and what is happening across the country. Serious injuries and the serious injury rate has been consistently declining over the last 5 years. This is also very consistent with what's happening across the country. So we've seen about a 39% decrease in serious injuries on average since 2020 and a reduction in 42.2% in the serious injury rate since 2020. Non-motorized users, these are bicyclists and pedestrians. The increase since 2020 is about 26%. It is a higher number on average than what happened in 2020. And that number is currently plateauing. So this is a trend line that we want to see actively decrease, not plateauing or increasing. Serious injuries have also decreased at about 16.6%, which is a very marginal decrease. So we've seen about a total reduction in 8.6%. So in Sarasota, Manatee, and consistent with around the country, non-motorized users are overrepresented in the fatality crashes. Pedestrians and bicyclists make up about 30% of the fatalities that we've seen on our roadways in the MPO 2-county area. So with that, I do want to add that historically, the MPO board has also voted to support the transit safety targets. These are the transit safety targets that we have from Greece Transit. We do not yet have the MCAT safety targets, but they did assure us they will get it to us before the MPO board meeting. So with that, I'll bring us back to those proposed safety targets. And we'll be able to any discussion and questions.
Yeah, Bob?
Good time to ask what the MPO is actually implementing that tried to reduce the fatalities and serious injuries. What are the strategies being employed to do that?
So we have a Destination Zero safety action plan, and that identifies strategies across 6 different categories, including things like engineering, planning, enforcement, education. We also look at equity, where are there clusters and what population groups are higher impacted. So we identify strategies around those categories. As Ryan mentioned, we also have a high injury network, and this is a network of 20 segments in the 2-county areas that are disproportionately represented in the fatalities and serious injury crashes. So what we're doing is we then take that high injury network and we develop a list of projects that we can implement to improve safety at those locations. With that, we also support all of our jurisdictions in their safety projects. So for example, Sarasota County and their partner jurisdictions, Manatee County and Palm Beach are all developing safety action plans, which will also result in projects. So altogether, we use the data and where these crashes are overrepresented to then make safety.
Are there any repercussions if you don't hit your targets? If you don't hit 0, is there any
Not
risk?
historically, no.
It's not like it's not like federal money that gets pulled back or something.
Not since the FAST Act were now under the new IIJA, so these performance metrics came out under the FAST Act. They were continued through the IIJA, the latest bill that is enacted until September of 26. So no, historically for the last 7 or 8 years, there's not been any federal pullback for not meeting these targets. I think that is realistic when you look at even if you're setting a number, the vast majority that are trying to reduce their serious injuries and fatalities have not met those targets across the board. So, like I said, we're open to if there is a suggestion by the Citizens Advisory Committee to change that. I mean, we have all the data available to say that. Once again, it becomes back to the board as a policy decision, and how would you like to go about reducing that number, and at what rate would you do that? That is the conversation that we had in the past. The board had also an at-length conversation similar to this one of how we got to 0 was they could not decide really, right? How to reduce that number from 125 and change to 120, 119. That's where the conversation, and we proposed various things from a set number to a percentage to a singular one every year. There is a number of things that you could propose, and we have in the past. I think back to 2017 when I first started. That is when we really tried to set the stage of how do you want to go about enacting this and then ultimately reducing those numbers. There is obviously probably going to be more debate on that again. I think every single year the board has a discussion on this exact topic, and it's really up to them. The CAC can certainly make a recommendation one way or another, say we want to keep it at 0 or we want to enact a certain reduction strategy based on statistical numbers that we have.
So Brian, would that be presented like as, if we decided not to do 0, we would say, hey, would it become a 5% reduction or something like
Could
that?
be any of those things. So by you have your five mandated measures, right? You've got number of fatalities and rates. So same thing, you would say the rate at which we're doing this, we could reduce it by this many percentage points, or the number would be, 120 would become 125. And then the rate would be 1.43, you want to reduce it to 1.42. Whatever that is historically prior to setting zero, that is what the MPO did. But again, much debate about what the ratio of reduction should be and what percentages those should be. Those were debated every year as well. Yeah, so those have been debated at length too. So, it's really up to the will of you all. We're here to provide the information and say what our recommendation is. Obviously, we think historically we've made recommendations to zero because of exactly those policy decisions that have come about and the difficulty in agreeing across the board.
Because you could,
Yeah.
not to interrupt you, but you could say we want to do a 1.5 reduction, let's say, and maybe we get a 1.6 and we're all patting ourselves on the back, but the reality is still 1.6 is a lot.
I also want to add, I think, part of the debate, which is how every year, is that, as I just mentioned, the 2024 data at this point is not yet complete. So we are deciding on safety targets based on data that may very well change. So usually what happens when we're looking at the crash data, we go back and we verify that the numbers are still consistent from 2020 to 2023. And very often what happens is that those numbers do slightly change. So a 0.1-0.5% increase or decrease, then it becomes very fluid relative to the fluidity of the data as well.
Just a couple of questions, if possible. So the serious injury rate, who defines what a serious injury is? Is it health insurance, what they want to cover on a serious injury, or is there an actual parameter? Because we know as insurance has not been doing so hot, they can decrease what a serious injury could look like.
Yes, it's set in federal law. And it's typically hospitalized or incapacitated.
Okay.
Those are the average thing. If you want to call it, that's what a serious injury is.
Yeah.
You basically have to be either in an ambulance or unconscious, typically, to be considered a serious injury.
And because I'm also thinking we probably already blew the zero target already this year, right? We're at the 13th day of January, that's out of the window. But my greater frustration is we did the same exact thing with education with no child left behind. It was ideal on a poster, but look where we are today with education. And I think that it's a very misleading, and I understand what they're trying to do with the marketing campaign of it, but we're all of us are already at, we might as well throw those posters out already, right? Now, does that say we failed? No, I think that when you're dealing with the transit system, now that makes sense. It's a third-party vendor providing transportation for large populations. So you want to get to zero on that because it's a third-party vendor transporting people around, that makes sense. When it's coming to I just think it's just misleading at times.
Do you ever get a statewide averages? Does that come in every year or like 1 year past it, that kind of thing?
Sure, the same database where we pull this data, is the state's data is also available. So we can always do a comparison to see what the trends are doing.
So in terms of goals, you could use that as a base basically to try to get that as a target, that's a possibility.
We could, the state does also set targets of zero.
Yeah, they're at zero, but they're not looking at their own statewide data and going from 1 year to the next, like there's a certain percent and it may decrease or increase, and their next goal is something, trying to make that better. They just stay at zeros, but.
Historically, we performed very similar to state average.
You tried to, okay,
Yes, yeah, and that's in typical urban metro areas, we set the precedent, right, for the year. There, we have, as Nina mentioned, on the high injury network, we have a few corridors in District 1. We've got 41 in Cortez outranks pretty much everything else in District 1. It's one of the top 10 in the state. Well aware of that as well. There's been a number of investments, and good and bad, I think we can all agree on that have been made on that corridor to attempt to alleviate that. We understand where a lot of these locations are, and on average, we perform pretty similar to the state. So I don't really want to compare ourselves to probably a poorly performing system in general, right? I think we would show that we're on track then. I think the real, debate is how do you, do you leave it at zero, or do you want to set a target that is, we think is an achievable goal, right? That was always the argument between Vision Zero, and it has been for years and years, is is aspirational versus, achievable, right? What is the short-term goal? That's what a number of MPOs and states around the country do, is they set a short-term goal of doing this many or this rate of reduction for over a 5-year period, and they think we can get there. And then, we leave zero out there as an aspirational. That's exactly how we started this whole process. We had zero as an aspirational in 2045 with interim targets in between. It's very easy to pick up and do again. It's simply, what is the direction of the policy of you all on the board?
Yeah, Bob?
One's a question, here, just be a motion, but do we include electric bikes in the bicycle? They're not really bicycles.
Not anymore.
They're non-accessed.
Honestly, I agree that we should be doing stretch goals, not unachievable goals. I mean, I would make a motion that we recommend the MPO set a goal of a 10% reduction over the next 5 years and identify concrete changes that can help achieve that. And then may work, may not, but at least we're doing something that is gonna maybe achievable.
I second that.
So we have a motion. For the purposes of discussion, Kurt, did you want to add something?
I just want to comment to it. I support it. And I'm thinking, Ryan, that, you've made improvements all across both counties, a number of things. And I think of the lighting and the striping along Cortez Road, for example. You have numbers of what the accident rates were along Cortez before that work was done. I'm sure you have numbers about what the accident rate is along there since you did the work. Or the roundabouts that you've built out on 64 and 70, or even in Sarasota, you have before and after numbers for those kind of things. And I'm thinking, for all the work that you have now in the hopper, that there should be some way then to say, if we do this work, we're going to experience an improvement in our road safety or whatever.
You would hope. Yes.
We hope. Well, I know there's a randomness to it and all that kind of stuff. But to Bob's point, you're spending a lot of time and money to try to do stuff, and this is one way to try to get our hands around whether we're making a difference or not.
Yeah, no.
In specific areas particularly.
No, we completely agree. I mean, I think that we do track the numbers, every year and even quarterly. We know exactly whether or not they're reacting to the metrics that we're putting out there, the improvements that we're doing, the enforcement we're doing, the education campaigns. We're seeing it and there's a lot of interesting revelations, right? Seeing, a 30-40% decrease in serious injuries is nothing to scoff at. That is a lot to do with improvements in vehicular safety. If you're making that argument, the counterpoint to that is you're seeing nearly 30% increase in bike peg fatalities. And that's to do with larger cars and safer cars hitting pedestrians and bicyclists, right? So those are inverse relationships that are pretty easy to pull out of the data. And we're aware of that, and that's because we do track and follow the data. So I agree with you. It is important to know where we stand. If that's what you all want to recommend, that, what is the percentage? What is the rate reduction that you would all like to propose to make it achievable or implementable in any way?
I think the population increase with percentages would be helpful on this as well. Now, obviously, if people are not going to be coming down to, let's say, Anna Maria these next year or so, hypothetically, because of the impact of the storm, and we see a drop, we can't assume immediately it's because of what we've done. It's just been a population drop there because of obvious reasons.
But that's tracked in the rate.
In a rate?
That's tracked in the rate.
Yeah.
That does reflect that.
Okay.
Yes, I can't see. It's all right.
I just kind of want to back, we've talked about this for a long time, and, I understand the objection to Destination Zero, but can you guys kind of remind us of how FDOT got to this and what the logic behind, because that's the board, the MPO board, when they follow that, it's in part because that's how FDOT has
Absolutely.
spent a lot of time and effort following this.
Absolutely.
So, we can recommend something as the CAC,
And I will
but
stand out and say,
it's not gonna go
we
anywhere.
were one of the only two, I believe, in 2017 that set our own targets. 25 of the 27 in the state adopted zero in
Right.
2017. So we've been one of the only ones to not follow that policy historically. And I think, I'm not sure that we saw a benefit from doing so, but if there is will and people want to see that as a potential way to grasp and understand our potential impact through engineering solutions or enforcement or whatever it might be, I do understand it both ways. I think there's value in understanding. The state's perspective is that no life lost is worth it on the system, right? So it's one of those, it is, and I would argue it is an aspirational type goal, right? So it's not that it's in a lot of the policy decisions, you're correct, the board made, we're in fact aligned with what the department has done and what the secretaries of the department have done. And then that is a factor in their decision making. So while I can say here that, right, that you can make the recommendation to the board to change that, does not mean that will certainly be the case.
There, Nina, I think you mentioned in one of the presentations quite a while ago about this sort of concept came from international, and there are other countries who have much better bought into this destination zero as a, full-fledged thing where we're actually gonna try and make this happen. Now, whether that's possible or not is, but it's more of a mindset thing that we're trying to embrace versus, we all know that here that is not likely to happen this year or, but.
So absolutely, I think so globally there is the Vision Zero initiative or Vision Zero campaign, which at its core has those that no fatality, no death or serious injury is acceptable. And so that's where this really started. Federal Highway Department of Transportation has also adopted that. And the state of Florida, it's called Target Zero. Also adopting that ethos, no deaths, no serious injury is acceptable. And so that's really what's at the core of this campaign. And the way that the target, and this is based on conversation that the board had last year, is that the way that this translates by adopting targets of zero is that no trend other than decreasing is acceptable.
Nathan can add a few words to it if you want.
So I wonder if there might be a little bit of a solution to make everybody happy. The fatality rates, that's a lagging measure, right? So everybody knows the difference between leading and lagging measures. So lagging is what you're trying to get to, leading is what you do to get there, right? So that's a lagging measure. What we're not talking about, what I think you've brought up a few times is like, what are we doing to actually get there? I don't know if you talked about the after studies. I don't know if you're just saying, assuming we have them, or you've seen the after studies for like Cortez and the roundabouts. District 1 has them. They are successful. It might help to say, hey, because there's reality, right? Of you have more people coming in, there's more development, all of this is happening, it's going to keep affecting it. And you have less money. But what you can affect are the actual projects that you do. So what you might consider is a leading measure of saying that when you do a project through the MPO where you prioritize it, you are addressing all the fatal and serious injuries on it, or you are eliminating risk factors. But if it helps, try considering from that perspective of what are you going to measure that you are actually going to do, and it gets you out of that. We're still acknowledging an aspirational goal of zero, but we have something that's bite-sized and achievable that we can actually say, hey, we've been successful at.
That was kind of the comment I wanted to make, was to, I don't know how to put it in the form of a motion, but amend what Bob said, that in addition to a 10% decrease or whatever you arrive at, that where we put money into projects and take an action, we see an additional 5% reduction in serious injuries in those cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a target to set to guarantee that is.
I think that's pretty much what you're saying.
Well, I mean, we have new projects. I don't necessarily believe this in screening with HSIP, but with new projects, I do like the HSM Part C method. So there's predictive methodologies based on studies that have been done to say, hey, this countermeasure, this whatever, we predict it can reduce 40% of these types of crashes, right? There's other ways too. You have the complete streets. It's adopted back in 2017, maybe. Back then sometimes. So there's places for it, but a lot of it is decision making. But you can look at the crashes. It's not going to be with 100% certainty, but still there are what's called crash modification factors. CNET Clearinghouse, FHWA, it's Lake NACTA. They all of these organizations put money or put a lot of time, effort, and money into it. Florida's done their own. They call them safety performance factors, SPFs, where they're saying, hey, look at all of these. We have a high statistical confidence that these countermeasures will reduce X number of these type of crashes. So when you do a new project, you can go through and say, we have these, and Nina's doing a lot of the HIN, I mean, that's part of the intent. I think what I was saying is like, with all of your projects, you can say, hey, we have these crash problems. We're addressing these trends. We've reviewed the fatal, severe, the bike ped, and we've looked for contributing factors. Because the Vision Zero as a national level thing, have any of you seen the new book, Killed by Traffic Engineering? All right, so Wes Anderson, I got to listen to him speak last week in DC. And what he's going into is like the old school idea of like, you know, was it the most dangerous part of driving is losing behind a wheel? And it's going into the idea that a lot of what we know is flawed logic or it's making excuses. So if I say as an engineer, I can't design for the user, it's a cop out on my part because marketing professionals design for the user all the time, right? So there's a lot of industries that design around the user. You can't control it, but you can make those decisions. So a lot of the Vision Zero is saying, we're not just blowing off and saying, hey, we can't do anything about it, people are stupid. It's saying that no, like we can make those decisions within our projects. So to your point, there are a lot of quantitative methodologies to get to taking a project and eliminating the crashes on it.
I'm saying that because I think it might help Lance out in that he could then go to his board or boss and say, we implement this project. We have data that shows that this would reduce bicycle pedestrian injuries and fatalities by 10%. That's what the MPO board has set as a goal or set as a policy.
Sure.
I think that's what you came to ask is what can I get from this to help me do my job when I have to make recommendations to my people on where we should spend our money or what projects should we do next or what should we add to a project to make it safer.
Well, here's suggestions or a motion on that.
So we do have a motion on the floor, so, I mean, we're just debating that motion officially, but go ahead, sir.
Instead of looking at it as a whole, you know, the whole zero for the whole MPO, we know the high conflict areas. We know where 50% of the crashes happen in 14 intersections or something like that. Focus on those and set a goal. We're gonna knock these 3 intersections or this high injury corridor by 50% or 10% or whatever you want to do by these actions. These actions being leading pedestrian intervals. There's a great cheap place to start. By whole pedestrian intervals like we have at Honore and Fruitville, works great. Keeps people from right turn on Reading into bike paths. If small inexpensive changes like that make a difference on those high injury networks, then you've got a win. You can say, look, we did this and we're going to do it more places because it worked. Either because it works or if it doesn't work, then you move to the next step. And then you have BRT lanes, you have bump outs on curves, you take away right turn lanes, you decrease radius of turns. You have steps where if it works, here's what we're going to do. Here's the goal we expect to get. If we don't get it in these places where we know there's problems, then we're going to do the next thing. And we'll keep going. This is not new stuff. Other places have done this and know how to do it. We can do that. We just have to slow the cars down. And we have to make sure people drive carefully because the infrastructure requires that they do it. It's not speed bumps, it's not speed limit signs. It's the way the road is built makes people only want to drive at a safer speed. So that's what you want to ask for suggestions. There's my suggestion. Pick specific places, do specific actions, and have follow-up actions when they do or don't work. That's all I guess.
Is that a motion?
You have a motion, we have a motion it's a blanket motion, basically, to change all of these to 10% reduction in 10%.
Well, it was motion to 10% improvement and try to identify specific measures that will help get us to those things as opposed to just improve safety. Like you were saying, it's like changing something on the design. And it's sad to say this, but I mean, you can't fix stupid either. We monitor all the fatalities, all the serious injuries, and how many people have gone down the road or on their bike or walked down to a street with this right up in front of them. I know I've certainly done it. I shouldn't admit that, but I think probably everybody at some point has been driving on the road. You can't fix that one. That's stupid. But there are certain things where, maybe like roundabouts. I mean, I remember, a DOT engineer telling me roundabouts don't reduce crashes, they reduce severity of crashes. I mean, it was a legitimate point. It was the first time I ever heard that said, and it was like, that's a legitimate point. That reduces serious injury. So what are the design implementations that the MPO thinks that, you know, can reduce crashes? I know, like, for instance, on 14th Street, you can't make a left turn anywhere. Still not sure that making a U-turn at a major intersection is safer than making a left turn into a business. And I always worry about the business that no longer gets people to come into it because they can't get there without going another mile down the street and doing a U-turn. But nonetheless, there are certain improvements that can be made that fix legitimate engineering solutions that fix problems. And then there's some that until you can figure out a way to nullify this, when they're entering and approaching the situation, you're still gonna have the person that walked out and steps in front of a bus.
Yeah.
And you're gonna show that as a fatality, just like you showed the car going through an intersection that maybe the intersection could have been redesigned. So I don't know how to.
That's fine. I mean, we can certainly, you can make a motion to say that we'll look at quantifiable ways to look at setting targets. You know, outside of this, looking at leading factors, looking at the implementation strategies that we have in our ability, right, as an MPO to say better ways to track specific projects.
Yeah.
And whether or not those can, coming up with quantifiable ways to determine what the percentage potential outcome of implementing that would be.
I don't have a problem with the idea of destination zero. I'm just saying that somewhere in there, we probably need some stretch goals that
Right.
implement how we, at the path to there.
I just want to throw in, I mean, and Pam or Nathan may be able to help more with that, but FDOT has a lot of these programs that do this. I think ICE and some of those that are designed to incorporate safety into the projects.
We have a whole team that's just
Exactly.
designated for safety.
So it's not like this has been ignored.
It's not, it's no.
No,
This
no,
is
we're
the
doing a
thing
lot of
that
CV stuff that's helping. I'm on the CV side, so we're doing a lot of those kinds of projects where we're implementing things like detecting the pedestrian in the crosswalk, you know, and putting a sign up for the drivers and those kinds of things. So, you know, a lot of this is being done. It's just maybe not at the forefront of what we hear about and see.
Right.
So we have,
It's working and some of it is.
Yeah, understood.
so we have a motion and it was seconded. So do we need to, I guess we need to vote on that motion, or do you want to withdraw the motion? Or do we want to?
Vote on it.
Vote on it, okay. The motion was to put 10%.
10% reductions on the rolling averages and then identify some specific measures that will help us achieve that.
Any further discussion? All right, so since we're ready to vote, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. I guess that's because this might be. Eight. I count that right? Still good. All right, all those opposed? Me, okay, 2. So the motion carries 8-2. Okay. We're gonna change it. Now, do we want to add any other motions? Is there a method to do anything else?
No, I mean, well, once again, it'll be brought forward for the board to have further discussion about, and if at their will, they determine they want to take that right, and then we will determine. They will determine best way to carry that.
Great, okay.
Could I say just one quick thing? I don't know if I would encourage sir, Danny, Danny, I would encourage you to go to the January 27th board meeting. With knowledge of the motion that we've just made, encouraging to go away from the zero, you had some very concrete ideas. I, as a board member, if I was on that board, I would welcome some of those ideas. I'm aware of them that may change their thinking of moving away from zero. So, and even the things that are happening now, I'm not sure they're aware of those either. The more they can hear, the more likely they are to change something.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, 5C, top 10 accomplishments. Did we do all this next year? Grace?
Hello, everyone. I'm Grace Sagowski, Public Development Coordinator at the MPO. I'm going to give an overview of the MPO's top 10 accomplishments from 2024. The full detailed list was attached here to the packet, so I'll give some highlights tonight. All right, we had several priorities funded in the work program. We also adopted 5 planning studies and kicked off 2 more studies at the end of 2024. We also kicked off the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan and drafted the 2050 Vision, which is creating a balanced future. This included 2 public surveys, 2 public workshops, and 2 outreach events, which leads me to the next accomplishment, public engagement. We launched 3 surveys, hosted and participated in several public workshops and events of our own, and also with our regional partners. And the MPO's 2024 Public Participation Plan was also adopted. Next is safety. FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, invited the MPO to pilot their organizational safety culture self-assessment. So we co-hosted a 2-day workshop here at the office. We also hosted our Destination Zero Roadway Safety Forum in May 2024 with participation from FHWA, the FDOT District 1 Safety Office, and the Florida Department of Health. We have seen lots of local and regional activity around the Florida Gulf Coast Trail. The MPO worked with local partners to add 6 new trail priorities. As for resiliency, the board adopted phase 2 of the Resiliency Vulnerability Assessment, which integrated feedback from our local partners from the recent hurricanes. MPO staff presented at the APA Florida Planning Conference, TRB, and our director Dave Hutchinson presented at multiple AASHTO meetings. I don't know what AASHTO stands for exactly. What's the word? Okay, Ryan says not to worry.
It's in the paper.
Finally, there were 38 committee meetings and 5 board meetings in 2024. So those are the highlights of the top 10 accomplishments. Thank you all for your support.
I do have a question because I just don't remember.
Sure.
Was the Ed Smith study?
That's it. It was just kicked off.
Just kicked off.
Oh, okay.
It's around City of Sarasota's.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at neighborhood redevelopment plan down there.
Yes.
One of the baseball.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Just started.
I don't know, I said
Thanks.
baseball.
Any questions?
Oh, Nina goes to the strategic priorities next too.
Okay.
But if you have any questions. No, okay. Thanks.
So this is just a quick overview of what we'll be prioritizing moving forward in 2025. Our activities are generally organized around 4 categories: planning, implementation, administration, and engagement. So on the planning front, our mandates are to adopt our safety performance targets and also to develop a list of project priorities that will be submitted to FDOT. So we'll be showing you a draft of that list today. We also monitor the tentative work program ahead of its adoption and work with FDOT to keep our transportation improvement program updated. Most importantly this year is adoption of the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan, which has to be adopted by October. We also kicked off 3 new studies last year, so we're hoping to finish those up this year. That's the Barrier Island Implementation Plan or Congestion Plan, the Transportation Investment Analysis, as well as the Ed Smith Study, which is a mobility study of the Ed Smith Stadium, very similar to the LECOM Village of the Arts study that we completed in Bradenton. We're also looking to kick off 3 new studies later in the year. That is a watershed and transportation asset analysis, which is a follow-up to the resiliency and vulnerability assessment that we completed. We'll also be looking at a regional transit feasibility study to consider things like passenger rail, water taxis, and bus rapid transit. And then also looking at regional freight and passenger rail specifically. Focusing now on implementation, we will be focusing on implementing the LRTP adopted 5 years ago. That's priorities around bicycle pedestrians and trails, congestion management, resiliency and safety. We will continue monitoring the transit signal priority pilot project that FUT now has programmed. And continuing to implement the safety action plan, focusing on education, seeing how we can support our enforcement partners, and continuing to develop more granular safety data. And then with adoption of long-range plan, we'll also update the project prioritization process. On the administrative end, a great deal of these are our annual efforts. But more specifically this year, we have our FHWA federal certification, which is something that happens every year. And then we're also working with FDOT currently on our state certification. We are also will be issuing a request for proposals for our general planning consultants. Engagement, we're really focusing on the long-range transportation plan. We will have the public comment period for that likely in July into August. So ahead of that, we're focusing on implementing our outreach strategy and doing ongoing. So that is a look at 2025.
Any questions of Nina? Okay, I guess we have to have a motion to accept this report, right?
To affirm.
Do I have a motion? Second? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Any a second.
Pick one. All right. One of the hard parts. Next is moving it up presentations. Presentation 6B, which is draft 2025 project priorities. Post. Should be 6A. Oh, we'll do Pam again. 6A FDOT report.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's like, what?
I was trying to help you out.
Okay, most of what I have to report on are the applications that are open. These applications, I'm giving you the FDOT due date, but they have to run through the MPO first so that they can prioritize and vet them. We have the transportation alternatives that's going to close on March 31st, as well as the CICP, which is a county.
Incentive grant program.
Thank you. It also closes in March 31st. We have Safe Routes to School is going to close at the end of this month, on January 31st. We have the Protect grant, which is a resiliency grant that will close February 24th. We did just receive the one, was a $6 million for bridge.
Basco Bridge, instead of key rehabilitation. Yeah.
So we did receive that one. We have congestion management and also the TRIP program. Also, we're encouraging the dates of also March 31st. The MPO, as you just heard, has all their accomplishments that they've done this previous year. Those items will also be in their joint certification, which we are in the process of working on right now. We should have the draft back to the MPO in February. We will complete the reviews and then present it to the central office. And that has to be done to the central office by June 1st. And I believe, Ryan, didn't you say your final call for your grants for the priorities is March 27th?
No, we're submitting them to you by March 15th. By March 27th at our board meeting.
At the board meeting.
We are
In those, okay. And that's pretty much it.
Any questions for Pam? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, 6B, MPO report, draft 2025 project priorities.
Yeah. So included in your agenda packets were a draft of the 2025 project priorities. This is a process that we go through every year. We work with FDOT to identify prioritized projects by the jurisdictions to be considered for funding in the work program. This list was developed through applications submitted by the jurisdictions. Each of these projects are eligible for funding through the FPO process. We will be submitting this as a final draft at the March meeting on March 10th and to be adopted by the board on March 24th. So at this point, we are working with the jurisdictions to ensure that the information on this list is accurate and up to date. Staff will be following up with the jurisdictions for any clarifying questions about the applications. And the priorities submitted by the jurisdictions have to be approved by the jurisdictions and be submitted to the MPO by February 3rd. So at this point, this is a draft list. It is pending further changes. And this list will come back to you in March to be voted on for board approval.
Have any questions for the list here? I do have a question. I think I have this all the time for some reason. But when it's green, it says it's partially funded. And I always struggle with how do I determine what part has been funded? Do I just look at the next phase and it's like okay.
Yeah, and certainly if you've got any specific questions, they vary in length and age and how some of those have been in the process for several years and have just been previously funded. So yeah, typically the next phase, it's the phase that needs to be funded.
It has not been funded. Correct. So like, key for my neighborhood obviously is the Long Oak Pass Bridge.
Correct.
And that's going into preliminary engineering. So we're waiting for funding.
Yes, it is, yes.
Right. And then the roundabout is in there somewhere too.
Correct. Yeah, and Broadway's been funded.
It has been.
Correct.
And if I may add.
Yeah, sure.
So we included on the list this year also the project ID number on each of the funded projects. So you can go onto the Transportation Investment Program and look up those projects and sort of see where the funding is and what the upcoming phases are.
Will looking on their website also give you specifics as to what will be happening with that project?
It'll only tell you the funding information in the years.
But if you have a specific one, we can certainly reach out to him and DOT and we can ask project manager for kids.
That you might know right off the top. I'm just wondering, the I-75 State Road 681 interchange.
Sure.
You have any idea what specifics?
No progress really yet at that point. That project was covered in the I-75 master plan, and it was brought up in the model, determined that it's a priority. It hasn't really reached anything other than feasibility and planning at this point. So that would have to be fully evaluated again. Being that it's a facility, strategic intermodal I-75 it's major state program, so it would have to be evaluated by the state further depending. IJRs, which is an intersection, interchange justification reports, all those things would have to be done prior to 681 being built. So it's in the early phases of planning at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, on page 3 starts the category FDOT partnership, including TRIP.
Sure.
The rankings go from the highest to lowest down to 8, and then there's a heading that says FDOT partnership box funds. Projects ranked 9, 10, 11 have higher ratings than projects.
Yeah, so
how does that work?
So the ones that are in the top were predetermined and set out in the cost feasible plan by your jurisdiction. So your technical staff, engineers, city planning, those were ones that were already determined in the 2045 plan as feasible segments. Box funds are, we open that up by having additional funding available, predicted revenue. It didn't actually turn out that way with COVID and everything else, but there was predictive in saying how much revenue do we think we're going to have. We open it up to a number of segments in locations where there could potentially be improvements made. Those ones are then under the box fund category. So it's perfectly feasible for locations based that were not previously identified later on to come in and say, okay, these are now eligible based under the box fund.
So even though it has a 2025 rank of 9, 10, and 11 in the box funds, their score would put them.
It's just because the other ones had dedicated revenue at the time.
Will they jump out of those projects, or are they?
If it's also based on prioritization of your local jurisdiction, which is what Nina mentioned. So the jurisdiction sends us a template that says, this is how we rank our 10 applications we submitted, we rank them 1 through 10 here too. But then we submit that as well to FDOT for further consideration. So our list combined with that, lots of other factors too. If they have match available, right? So say a city comes in and has 50% match for a project, that also elevates it on the list as well. There's a number of factors in how those are feasible and made feasible by the department and ourselves. So there's lots of things that go into it. So that score alone is simply how it ranks in the tool that we have set up.
And just a little bit on the timing, when it's marked construction, CST, right? That's funds are already in place or construction already started?
It needs construction funds.
It
So
needs construction
funds. Once it's fully funded, it will come off the list.
Okay, got it.
And I'll just add one thing on Nina's front. Yeah, these were applications that were all, every project you see on here, minus the ones at the end that say jurisdictional needs, were applications submitted by your jurisdictions to fit these program types. So we do have the vast majority, I think, Nina, on hand at this point. There is a few that we need to get a few clarifications on. But this will be going to the board both this month in January as a draft as well, back to all of you in March for approval, the TAC, the CAC, and the board. In March.
Okay.
Yep. This is just to get you all aware, so you can take a look at the project list, and if you've got any questions in the next few months, then we can help address those. We want to get it to you early.
Any other questions? All right, move on to following the list. Now we've got barrier island implementation.
Great. So we have been working with the MPO to address some of the congestion issues on the Barrier Island. They asked for us to kind of look at some of the main offenders in terms of intersections and come up with a bite-sized list that could be tackled. To that end, looking at congestion, improving mobility as well as resiliency. Part of the effort is also reviewing previous studies, case studies around the country, as well as other, I would say, like sister island communities around Florida, and then looking at resiliency efforts as well. There will be a dashboard as part of it. This is going to be our first page, essentially going to be looking at where the congestion issues are. And in the second page, I think it'll be identifying kind of what's going to be going on. So to get there, we divided the roadway into 4-mile segments. Origin destination pairs are created for each segment using Python scripting. And then Google Directions API, it's kind of a database looking at, so when you're looking at your Google Maps and it shows red, green, whatever, that data is available to get from Google on the back end. So using that, we added that to the segments, and then because of the recent events, whether it's hurricanes, COVID, whatever, we projected out very short term. We took the historical traffic and projected to essentially, so this was done a little bit, probably December. So it was only about a month projection for the first one, which is probably today. And then again in May, we wanted to get at the time when you had seasonal residents, as well as capture the time when you have some of the summer visitors, right? Both traffic patterns, see what's going on. This pulled in 1 hour increments, and then those segments were ranked based on congestion metrics. We can get as deep as you would like. I would recommend just hitting it surface level. All right, so there's 4 metrics we looked at. And I want to be clear with this. Everything is congested, right? We're not looking at everywhere there is congestion or even everywhere there is bad congestion. We were looking for the worst congestion and finding a bite-sized amount of projects that would come out of that. So planning time index, how much extra time travelers should plan to ensure on-time arrival, even in the 5% worst travel times. So if it normally takes you an hour and a half to get there, it's going to take you 2.5 to 3 hours to get there. The 80th percentile travel time index, it kind of looking at the moderately congested conditions, looking at regular delays. So even if it's say you have a location that is very congested for an hour, to also kind of look at those ones that are just really congested instead of very. That's a quantifiable term. for a larger portion of the day. Semi-standard deviation, looking at the travel times relative to free flow time, and then the congestion frequency, which is just the amount of time during the day that it is congested as a ratio. Top locations that came out of it. The reason why I went through is when I go through some of those. Canal Road and Ocean Boulevard, one thing we found out with our methodology is that if you have an area with heavy parking or four-way stops, something where people are naturally sitting, it pops up as congestion, using that methodology. So this is not the one that we are going to be looking at. Cortez Road and 789. We had some we were originally not going to look at it because it was involved in the FDOT P&E project. We're going to be revisiting and meet with FDOT and just solidify what's going on with their plans to make sure they are or are not addressing it and when. Based off of that conversation, I think we'll work with the NPO to figure that out. For instance, if they are definitively going to put something out there, but it might take a while, we might look at operational improvements. If it's something that's further out, we might talk about something a little bit more substantial. The State Road 64 from East Bay Street to Gulf Drive. Anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up.
So we go back to that previous slide. So this is Gulf of Mexico running vertically
Yes, sir.
into Cortez, right? And you'll probably have a copy of a letter that I sent to Ryan. You will get it if you don't have it. On behalf of the Longboat Key North Group, which is a couple hundred people, a couple hundred groups of folks there. Because we've talked about from that intersection all the way down through and to cross the Longboat Pass Bridge, so forth, the congestion. And anyway, I mean, it sounds like to me this is new to you. You're just getting into looking at this area, right?
In this project.
In this project, right. Okay.
I have looked at this area fairly extensively.
So, and one of our concerns is, you know, that segment of Gulf of Mexico right there is devastated. And the population there is not gonna be this season. It's not, I mean, it's hardly anybody there now, and it's usually packed, because I live right there. And so we're concerned that the study is not gonna accurately, you know, understand the traffic issues there.
So two issues with that. One, we're not using counts of what's actually out there right now.
Okay.
We're using projections off of historical data to normalize the impacts from the hurricane and eliminate what's actually out there.
Okay.
So what you should see is based off the historical data and the trends that you were seeing climbing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Second one is this has been studied. This is the third study in recent history that has gone through this intersection.
Right.
We have a fairly good idea of what's going on. The biggest questions for intersections like this is what the local government wants to do and how much money and time we're willing to put towards it.
Gotcha.
In the past, when we did the original variant traffic study, a lot of the island we weren't willing to do eminent domain or do widening efforts, which leaves it to like striping and lane assignments.
Right.
There was roundabout discussion at the time with PD&E coming down. There's been some discussion since then where it seems like FDOT's may or may not go that direction. Thursday, we have a conversation with Holmes Beach Commission about whether or not they're open to pursue Bradenton Beach, Mayor Chappie, whether or not they're willing to consider condemnations. And that's not something that is approached lightly, and that's something that if we are going to go that route, the community has to be.
And I think the letter that I sent to our group presented that idea too, because a lot of those buildings right there are destroyed, or in really bad shape. And now might be the time that could work. I don't like the idea of condemning something and taking it, but it might be the right time, given the circumstances of the area.
It may be that they're more willing at this point to rest their hands, but that's a local decision if we want to support with that. I will say with induced demand, we gotta be careful with this stuff, right? Because there is a chance that as we build things, it's still going to.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
So this one, I guess we're gonna call this one to be determined. But the conversations with Bradenton Beach, with FDOT, with the NPO, we'll figure out where we go with this intersection in particular.
Okay.
64 East Bay Street, Gulf Drive, this is another one, I've got a meeting with, Jimmy Ilse, to discuss some of these, figure out what's going on. Once again, there is a PD&E. A few years ago, that PD&E was addressing these intersections. With the funding issues now, I'm not sure where it's at, it's similar to Cortez. If FDOT is not addressing it, then we will be investigating. US 41 in Bee Ridge, Midnight Pass and Beach Road. This was an outlier in the data. I think this is not entirely correct. It's but I can't figure out why it showed up. Minnesota East section, everything that we have seen and all the data we've had, there's no reason for this to be showing up. Unless anyone has any insight that I don't.
Yeah, I got one for you. It's a popular cycling route and it's a 2-lane road. So it would not surprise me if cycling.
Okay.
Causing slow flow.
Because it's a short section, it's essentially like just the area right here, just north of the boat ramp. But it doesn't touch the boat ramp, because I was wondering if it was queuing, but the boat ramp itself.
There's an S turn there, there's a double S turn just north of the park. I don't know if that would slow things down, sand blows over some. The sea grapes come in off the east side into the road, so it narrows up. Those are one of the vessels there.
I don't know that there's a lot that we're gonna accomplish studying that. And since there's not a ton of traffic on the road, I think this is one that we are probably going to skip as well. Blackburn Point Bridge, once again, this is one of those ones, I'm bringing these up just to show what ranked in the methodology, right, part of the conversation. This is another one of the ones where people are stopping, they're doing a little bit of waiting sometimes. The data is showing that as congestion, because it's the same kind of pattern that you would if you're waiting on somebody in front of you as opposed to waiting on someone to pass through the bridge. There at 72 and US 41, this has also been studied extensively. The improvements that could have been made are being made. Without changing this to an alternative intersection, or doing, there's one potential option. And that is closing the median opening at Avenue A and the county would have to work to create a new connection between Avenue BC and Avenue A so that people in Avenue A can get out Avenue Signal. We're going to look at crashes there. If there's not a safety issue, we will probably leave this one alone. Ben Franklin Drive and Tyler Drive. This is parking throwing it up, but this one I think has enough characteristics a little bit different from the first location that we will take at least a cursory look at this location to make sure what's going on before we pass on improvements or not. I know in the previous various studies, we recommended parking changes. That could be an option. The St. Arnold Circle area. This one, the city was going to study it. It is not now. That being said, we have been instructed in the past that we cannot touch parking and we can't touch the curb lights. So if you can't touch parking and you can't touch the curb light, there's not a lot that we can do. The Gulfstream roundabout popped up, obviously. This one has been, the new roundabout is installed, it's functioning. One of the reasons why it showed up may be because of that historical projected data like we were talking about. It is not intelligent enough to know that a roundabout has been installed. So while it's also taking care of the dips from the hurricane traffic, it's also going to take care and kind of erase out the Gulfstream traffic.
Is that one working well?
What's that?
Is that one working well?
I have been told, I don't know if you're aware, I have been told that there is a recent study on the Gulfstream evaluating it and it is beating the original projections.
Yes, good.
I feel you, Bob.
I went out to St. Arnold's, I was like, that's not well.
Gulf Drive and Holmes Boulevard and at Holmes Boulevard and Marina Drive. Honestly, especially talking with it's where I think the issue here, and I experienced it when I left. It's from Gulf Drive, it's backing up around the corner. This is coming up because it is an intersection, but it's really the backup from Gulf and Manatee. Midnight Pass and Sticky Point, we'll take a look at. 776 and Minnesota Beach Road. Any questions? We don't have a lot tonight. So far, where we're at is essentially the intersection identification. We're working on getting the data now to get further into the analysis. But as of this time, really it's just identifying the locations, getting feedback from the committees before we move forward in terms of finding solutions.
So you say you're gonna look at is, you're gonna come up with alternative concepts or?
Within reason, so we're not, it's not a scope to where we're gonna come in and say, hey, we need like a CFI right here per se, right? But we're gonna be looking at what we have, looking for operational fixes, whether it's a, so like in the original Bear Island study, one of the things we found was that congestion issues for like a zipper here, or maybe a domino would be a better analogy, where you would get bad, and you would get bad, and you would get bad, and then all of a sudden, the turn lanes would start splitting back into the main line. And then once that happened, everything's just really bad. So that could be something we'd be looking at is, hey, is there enough queue storage with there? Is the timing appropriate? Is the lane assignments appropriate? Those type of stuff. There may be, addition of a center turn lane, addition of a right turn lane. I don't think we're getting into doing, stage 3 ice in terms of completely like rebuilding and determining an interchange or something like that.
So, I just checked, the organization that, I was referring to that I also want to, they're having a meeting next Thursday at 1:30. Would you be available for a 15-minute just talk? It's a Zoom meeting. That's what they do.
Probably. I've committed to a meeting with Bradenton. I think it's 12, but it's not on my calendar yet.
Okay.
So as long as it doesn't conflict with that.
So I can get up with you. I was afraid you were gonna bolt out of here after you're finished and.
I mean, I'm what?
It's okay, it's all good. So I wanted to get this out there beforehand. I know that they would appreciate hearing this from you. Because it's a big concern for us. As are all of these areas that you've talked about, the concerns of all of our citizens.
Do we have access to that presentation? I was looking, I got the dashboard, I didn't see anything about that.
Yeah, that's, I did the same thing.
It's posted on the website after the meeting.
After the meeting?
Yeah.
On the general NPO website?
Sorry, on the meetings website, the meetings page on the website, if you scroll down to the CAC, it'll say like the date of the meeting, it'll have the agenda, the meeting notice,
Okay.
the presentation, and then.
It's not on there
I'll
until.
look for it after the meeting then.
Yeah, because I don't upload it until after in case
Gotcha.
something changes.
Okay. Any other questions for Nathan? Okay. Thank you very much. All right, 6B3, transportation investment analysis. Ryan, you're up.
Yeah. So similar to this Bear Island study just kicked off and we're moving forward with that. We're also just signed the contract today for our transportation investment analysis. I brought it before in a general concept, but we do have a scope now. It's included. And the idea behind that is really evaluating our investment over the last 5 or 10 years and doing a lot of what we're talking about right now. What we have been talking about and better understanding, what our funding sources, revenue sources are, and what we've accomplished with those things over the last several years. Not just our discretionary funds that the MDO has direct discretion over. So our SU funds, our trails funds, our carbon reduction funds, but also state funds, including district dedicated revenue, SA funds, and how those were allocated to our region. So the idea of the study is to take a broad, comprehensive look at all those funding mechanisms and how we've utilized those over the few years. The last, I would say, 10 years is what we're looking at in the time horizon. So really, the outcomes that we want to find are what were the holdups, what were the issues with projects, why wasn't the money fully spent or executed? Is it delays in projects? Is it cost overruns? What are the reasons why we didn't accomplish what we wanted to? And what are some of the successes that we were able to accomplish? So really, once we dive into it more, we'll have a number of presentations for you all on this as well. Really, we want to better sure as we're nearing the adoption of our LRTP here in October, we want to make sure that we've got a complete understanding of any issues that we've had in funding our priorities over the last, 2 cycles of the LRTP, so that we can either remedy those issues here in the near term before we adopt the LRTP, or we can create strategies to make sure that we're working with the department, we're working with your cities and counties to make sure that we're effectively spending our money in the most effective manner we can. That is the goal of this study. We'll certainly, elicit and garner any feedback from you all throughout the process. It should be very insightful for all of us. We have a very good idea about all of our money spent. We want to see how the state has been investing in our region, and we want to make sure that it's cohesive with our vision, with the vision that's set by this committee, by the board, and vision set out in the LRTP. So I'm happy to take any questions. I don't have for a lot for you, just signed it today, but I'm able to bring it to you all to let you know that'll be taking place over the next 9 or 10 months. So as we have updates, we'll be sure to provide them to you all. Any questions? No. All right. Thanks, Amy. All right, well, like I said, we'll keep you posted, and make sure we send out any information we got. No problem.
Thank you, Ryan.
That's good. On the,
Okay, long range transportation plan.
For the purpose of this is just to give a very quick update on where we are with the update of the long-range transportation plan. So to date, we have drafted a background research report. We also drafted the 2050 vision, which is called Creating a Balanced Future. This was presented to this committee in November last year. We have those draft materials available if you'd like to take a look at them. At this point, we are really focusing on updating our goals and objectives, and from there going into our prioritization update. As part of that, we are really soliciting a great deal of public feedback. So we hosted a workshop on December 10th and then had an outreach event on December 12th. We do currently have a survey live. It'll close at the end of the month. And that's another opportunity to tell the MPO and its partners really what are the goals and objectives that we want to align the plan with, and how do we use that moving forward? What sorts of projects would you like to see implemented and funded over the next 25 years? At the same time, we're also updating all of the chapters of the LRTP and really focusing on our safety chapter as well. So I think this slide says we're about 50% on the chapters, or probably closer to about 80 or 90%. As part of that, we are updating the safety projects that will become a part of the cost feasible plan. So we're looking at the high entry network, and we're doing a further crash analysis, identifying high crash segments and corridors, focusing on non-motorized safety as well, so that those can be put into the plan for funding considerations. And then looking at our revenue forecast, and that will get us into the cost feasible plan. As part of the cost feasible plan, we'll have another workshop, another outreach event, and another survey. All of that will be scheduled in April. So we'll send those dates out to you as soon as we have them. Really, the cost feasible plan is the crux of the long range plan. This is the list of projects that will be eligible for MPO funds over the next 25 years and 5-year time bands. So that draft project priority list that we looked at earlier today, those are all included in the 2045 cost feasible plan. We will be soliciting a great deal of feedback from our jurisdictional partners, from the state, and from the elected officials that sit on our board. So it's a very important component of the outreach process. So keep your eyes out on that. As I mentioned earlier, we'll do public comments likely in July and August, and then prepare for adoption in September or October of this year. This is the information on the survey. You can access it through the LRTP website, transform-tomorrow.com. And you have until about the end of the month to get some feedback back to us.
Good deal. Any questions for Nina? All right. All right, that's it for item 6 of the agenda. Next item is election of the 2025 chair and vice chair. Looking for volunteers, so yeah.
I would like, if at the pleasure of the board, I would like to step up as the next chair.
So Does he, whatever, they're-
You're either or.
I'm either or, so it doesn't matter. Okay, great, okay.
Search for a year.
What's that? But,
Vice
The vice chair, sorry.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sorry.
See, that's why Rachel needs to keep me on track.
okay,
And she's actually from Manatee County, so the next chair would be Manatee County.
But we have some new folks that I think are eligible now that have served for a year.
For a year, I don't have.
I have done this several times. I'm more than willing to let someone else do this. And if Keith is eligible, I'm more than willing to let him be the next chair.
I've done it too, and I'm happy to let someone else do it.
Yeah.
is Keith eligible? Is that the question, or?
I don't think he's been on for a year.
How
But
about
I
Kurt?
don't have that.
How about Kurt?
Guidelines.
Can he be vice chairman, or?
The vice chair would actually be from Sarasota.
Oh, it has to be from Sarasota.
Our city of Sarasota and not any jurisdiction within the.
Keith, have you been on for a year?
Not quite.
Kurt, have you been on for a year?
I was gonna suggest you, Bob.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that.
It's already done it too, though.
Have you been on
So
for a
we
year?
need
Kurt?
somebody from Sarasota.
All
I
right,
nominate Kurt.
we nominate Kurt.
Second.
All right, so we have a nomination of Kurt for chairman.
Yeah. He's eligible.
Okay. And do we have a nomination for vice chairman, or I guess we just do one at a time?
Yes.
Okay. We can vote on this, I guess. So all those in favor of Kurt as chairman for next year, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so nobody opposed.
Stick around, Keith, in 2 more years, it can be you.
So now we need a Sarasota County vice chair. No, I got that. Anybody from Sarasota
I
County?
think, Don is the only one from Sarasota County. Don McNally.
Oh, Steve.
Oh, look there.
I don't know if City of Venice is.
That's good. That is-
We will?
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Do this time.
Next time. See.
So we have, Tom's been nominated for vice chairman for, so all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, great. New board.
Keith, you can do it next time. It's a year for a year. Well, you can be the vice chair, I guess.
Hey, I go wherever I'm called. So.
Okay, so I guess normally we would go around the table one time. I want to thank everybody. I think Nina reminded me or told me, we had one of the most successful years in 2024. I'm proud to have been a part of that, and y'all made this happen. I mean, we finally got to. So we did good.
Thank you, Eddie.
Around the table, Steve, anything?
I'm good, thanks.
Tom?
This may be more of a procedural matter regarding the regular MPO board meetings. Is there a slot on the agenda for the CAC to have?
Historically, yes, if there is a desire to bring that back and have a 5-minute report, that is certainly acceptable. It's done in the past, and some chairs said, years and years ago, said they didn't feel the need that we put every action and report in the minutes. If you'd like to go up and speak for 5 minutes about the CAC meeting.
I just wanted to share my experience as a member going to represent South Sarasota County on issue on River Road. I was very disheartened in the fact that they gave me the 2 minutes and I came with a message and a solution. I never got the solution and was shut down by the board president. So I would like to make the comment that the CAC privileged to have a little more opportunity to speak to the MPO board members themselves rather than just the 2 minutes of the public is allowed.
I think it'd be a good idea. I know I attended a lot of the meetings, but it was all, because I thought they might.
It was the one time I had something to bring up from my area and the hour drive up here and then 2 minutes and hour drive
Yeah,
home. It's not
exactly.
satisfying for me.
Right.
I feel sorry, for what you I'm glad we gave you more than 2 minutes.
I appreciate that so much, thank you.
We try to be a little flexible, I think. Keith, anything to add?
I'm good. Just a quick question. So at Manatee County Board of Commissioners, they want the reports from the advisory committees. Do we need to select somebody to do that? It's on their agenda now, that advisory board.
Usually.
The chair.
The chair, you.
The chair user go.
Oh, so the chair's got you there?
That goes with the chair. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's up to the chair to delegate to much money.
I did not sign up.
We'll work together.
Be careful, if I delegate to everybody.
I can provide the minutes.
I don't care what Manatee County.
Let it grow now.
Yeah, I mean, we could provide, you could give a
Yeah,
copy.
they
of
have a
the
section on their agenda now, so I'm just asking if we need to represent ourselves there or not.
meeting. That's the chair. Yeah.
I'll talk to
Kurt, anything? Sarah?
No, sir.
Bob?
Nope.
Patricia? Anything?
Hi, I'm new here. I finally found the building. I'm here because I wanted a person with a disability. And you can hear my voice and my tremors. So I hope to bring the ideas of DADA plus what would be best for people with disabilities as far as trails go and safety are my two biggest issues.
Great. And I know, Patricia, you've attended several of the workshops. That's where I've been a couple of times. So we appreciate it. So you've really been active, even though you haven't been on this committee. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess anybody else? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.